All right, so we're obviously we're down today. I'm hoping this is going to be the pick me up that I need. Okay, well, all guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0, of course, are brought to us by the official beer of ZASLOW Show 2.0. You know, we're talking Johnny Cuba, a refreshing German lager in a can. You know what I'm talking about. Hey, you kick back this afternoon, you got nothing to do, you go sit outside. I'll be outside the ZASLOW mansion. I'll be on the porch, on the patio there next to the pool. I'll have a Johnny in my hand. Come on, that's how we can get the day going. Pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba, your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. Remember, always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us here, like I said, hoping she'll make me feel a little bit better today, is our girl, ESPN radio host, Amber Wilson. Hello, Amber. How are you this morning? Good to see you.
Hello, Jonathan ZASLOW. It's excellent to see you as always.
So I'm very down this morning, predictably. I mean, who the hell needed two nights in a row where our teams, and look, you're not like a big Panther fan, but I think you caught a little bit of Panther fever during this playoff run. Certainly, you take the Heat very serious. These last two nights, I mean, two nights in a row, we wind up having our seasons end. You know what I feel like this morning, Amber? It's kind of like one of those deals where it's better to, what's the saying? It's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all.
Never to have loved at all.
Right? That's how I feel this morning, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was so sad yesterday. So sad. I care about the Heat so much, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm a hockey fan to that degree by any means. I mean, I've covered the Florida Panthers, obviously, working with you all those years. I've been down there. I've been in the locker room. I've interviewed the players, great guys, great franchise, great organization. And there's some real diehard Panthers fans down there that don't get enough attention. So I felt really good for them in this run. But I care so much about the Miami Heat, right? Like through and through. And yesterday, I didn't want to have the conversation of what a great season, what a remarkable run. Like I just wasn't there yet. People were doing that immediately after the loss. I log on to Twitter. Denver Nuggets are celebrating. There's
I was doing it a little bit
down. Yeah, and everybody's doing a hell of a run, which it was a hell of a run. I just wasn't really in the mood to have that conversation yet because yes, an extraordinary run. One that none of us expected, an extraordinary run for the Panthers as well. But the way that both of those series ended, going into those game fives, down 3-1, it felt like the magic that had been in the other series leading up to that point. They just couldn't find, neither team could find that same magic, particularly offensively in either of those series. And so they were just such disappointing series really overall. And from the Heat perspective, that game 5 was really frustrating because you felt like they could have won that game. Like that was a game that they could have taken if they had just been able to find some semblance of an offense, or if Jimmy was able to show up more than just the last 3 minutes.
So what did you make of Jimmy Butler's performance? Not just, specifically in game 5, but really the entire series. What did you make of Jimmy?
Listen, you live by the Jimmy, you die by the Jimmy, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. I'm not going to sit here and pile on Jimmy in any other way because we wouldn't be in that situation. We would have never been in an NBA Finals if not for the greatness of playoff Jimmy. Playoff Jimmy did not make an appearance in the Denver Nuggets series. And I don't know what's going on with the ankle. I don't think it's an excuse, though. He's out there. He's playing every minute. I don't want to hear it, right? He's out there. It's like, I didn't want to give the excuse to Jason Tatum. I'm not going to give the excuse to Jimmy Butler. If you're good enough to get out there and you're good enough to play through it, then you've got to play your hardest.
But you know what? A huge difference between Tatum, who you bring up there, and Butler. Like, Jimmy is never going to tell you he was hurt. Jimmy, after the game, said, I'm totally fine. There is nothing wrong. Jason Tatum, first chance he had after game 7, I was a shell of myself. It's a major difference.
And there's realities there where if you are physically a shell of yourself, I would imagine it is very difficult.
I mean, I think Jimmy was also. But I think Jimmy was also.
That's probably true. The only thing I will say is that I had Kendrick Perkins on Joe and Amber 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on ESPN Radio and Sirius XM Channel 80. That's how you plug. I had Kendrick Perkins on my show a few days ago, and he said he doesn't want to hear it when it comes to Jimmy's ankle because these guys get shot up right before they walk on that court. You know, he can't tell you how many times he got shot up right before he would walk on that court, and you are numb to pain. You are numb to it. So yes, you're not necessarily still the same player as if you weren't injured at all, but it's not like you're battling through the pain the entire time when you're out there, because of course they're giving you that good before you go out there. It was obvious that Jimmy didn't have his legs. There is something going on with Jimmy physically and maybe emotionally as well. Who knows what's happening there in
I think
his
there's
personal
something
life.
going on personally as well.
That's probably true. Nevertheless, you're out there, you're playing damn near every minute of these games. You're in an NBA Finals, and the frustration from me, and again, we wouldn't have been there without Jimmy Butler, so I'm not trying to criticize Jimmy, but the frustration was he did show up for the final 3 minutes. And if you could show up for the last 3 minutes, why not show up for the last 8 minutes? Because I feel like that's all we would have needed to beat the Denver Nuggets in that particular game. I'm not talking about in the series, because we wouldn't have been beating them in the series unless we got one of those 45-point Jimmy nights, which clearly we weren't going to get. But I do think we could have extended the series if he had just shown up a few minutes earlier.
Well, the same thing happened essentially in game 2. All right. The only game the Heat won where, yes, Duncan had the big start to the fourth quarter where we took the lead, but then it was all Jimmy the rest of the fourth quarter, and we won that game. And I think what happened, and it's not just this round, I think this was happening the Boston series as well, because remember, Jimmy got hurt in the beginning of the New York series. Right. I think Jimmy, also his age plays a little bit of a role. We get to this point in the season, he looked very fatigued to me. I think Jimmy knows he doesn't have 48 minutes and he needs to kind of pick his spots. And it's almost as if he's biding his time a little bit. Can we stay close going into the fourth quarter? And then I can do my thing and just expend all of my energy. And I think we saw a little bit of that the last couple rounds this postseason. And I definitely think we saw it in the fourth quarter of game 5.
I mean, he's got too much on him. He's got too much on him in the first few series to get through an NBA final. We saw it in 2020 as well. It was the exact same thing. The famous picture of him leaning over. He's completely gassed, exhausted.
And he had
that was a few
for
years
6.
younger.
He had nothing.
And that was a few years younger. That was out without the ankle injury in the New York series, obviously. And he was still gassed. So you're right. It's just too much. It's too much load. It's too much carry. He's remarkable. He's phenomenal. He can't still then be playoff Jimmy by the time he gets to an NBA Finals. They need more help offensively. That's the reality of it. They're right there, though, and it's remarkable. I mean, what he's done in his 4 years, 3 Eastern Conference, go at it here Finals, in the title game, obviously 2 actual Eastern Conference titles. Like it's been a remarkable run for Jimmy Butler. He just doesn't have enough to take that next little step.
This was my big fear. And I talked about this on your show, one of my appearances you had me on like a month ago or whatever, in the midst of Jimmy having this amazing run, how I felt that the loss of Tyler Hero was a little bit overstated because, okay, those shots aren't just vanishing into thin air, those field goal attempts. So, Tyler's 20 points aren't just poof, they're gone. Jimmy is the one now with the ball instead of Tyler all that time. Jimmy is the one taking those shots, and that's a really good thing. But my fear was, is he going to get tired because he's doing all of it without Tyler Hero being there? And it seems like that may have played a huge role in what happened.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I do think that had Tyler been available, it certainly would have been helpful because you are talking about their second best offensive player. You are talking about 20 points per game that he was averaging this season. I don't, the first few series, it was really easy to overlook. Obviously, the chemistry, they're clicking without him. They're doing just fine. Let's not even bring Tyler back if we can. But against Denver, you saw it. And you saw it because of the fatigue with Jimmy. You saw it because the shots weren't falling for guys like Max Strus. And in fairness to the Max Struses of the world, that's not who you should be relying on in an NBA Finals. Like, he should be a nice little piece. He had too much on his shoulders. It shouldn't be Max Strus. It shouldn't be Gabe Vincent that we're putting all of our hopes and dreams into. No disrespect to those guys. They have been phenomenal. They are role players. Tyler Hero is supposed to be one of those players that can shoulder some of those expectations. And frankly, I think he probably could have. We know what he did in his rookie season, and now he's years older. Maybe that would have been a missing piece there against Denver, but I still don't feel confident enough about that when I saw the size disparity, when I know what Denver can do. and what Jokic obviously can do. Not that anybody can shut that guy down, but I don't know if we're a Tyler hero away from beating the Denver Nuggets.
Were you upset he didn't play Game 5?
I was actually, yeah. And I mean, all I can think, listen, I trust Spo. So upset. I mean, I'm not upset with any particular individual, right? I trust Spo. He had told Roz, Gold, and Wude, Tyler had a couple days before, that he was still, when he was on his follow through, that he was still in significant pain on his shot. His hand was still swollen and still really, really painful. So if you're dealing with that, then maybe you weren't actually ready to play. And I'm guessing that, maybe we would have seen him if it had gone to 7. Maybe that was Spo's plan. I got to trust Spo in that spot, that he felt like he was more of a liability than an actual, any sort of help. But I was disappointed, I guess maybe is the better word, as opposed to Matt. I was disappointed that he just wasn't well enough for us to get anything out of him. Because I think even a few minutes would have helped, frankly, because they would have had, not that he would have been great, but they would have had defensively to have had to account for him. And that's not a good defense. Like, that's not a great defensive team. I mean, they were decent in the NBA finals, but traditionally that Denver Nuggets team, they need some work on the defensive end of the court.
I saw some numbers. I think Tom Haberstroh put it out and I retweeted it, where, for as dominant as Denver was this series, the Heat defensively against the Nuggets not only were far and away the best defense that Denver saw this postseason.
Not even close.
But they were holding Denver's offense to a league average type of offense this series. That's wild.
It's wild. I mean, Miami stuck to its game plan of being defense first, and it was effective against that juggernaut. And there's some frustrations there. I get that we always have with Bam, and you want him to be more aggressive and you don't want him to settle for some of those jumpers that he's settling for. And that's what the Nuggets are giving him, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. I thought, considering who he's up against, considering the narrative going into that series of how terrible Bam has been against Jokic, considering what his job was in this series, honestly, I thought Bam was phenomenal.
He was.
Because the Heat were really good defensively. They were. This team, this Denver Nuggets team is that good, where yes, it doesn't always look like it. And when you're reading the scoreboard, you're still looking at a Jokic that's, averaging a triple-double, sort of no problem. But that's him. That's how he is. They were so much better defensively against Denver than anybody else was against Denver. The problem wasn't the Heat's defense. The problem was that the shots were not falling. And if they had just gotten a little bit more, I mean, again, the frustration for me was Game 5, that Denver Nuggets team was beatable. Jokic, I mean, I don't even have what was his, he didn't have a triple double. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but Jokic was still, 28 points, right? 28
points. He only had a few assists
16 boards. Yeah. For Jokic is a down game for Jokic because he only had the 4 assists, right?
It's amazing the way we look at him, right? It's like, hey, you weren't as good as you could have been because you didn't help. You were awesome, but you didn't help all the other guys make shots. You only had 6 assists.
Well, that's the brilliance of Jokic, right? I mean, he's an unbelievable player. But Jamal Murray, they held him to 14. The point is that defensively, yes, Michael Porter Jr. did his thing in this game, whatever. But defensively, he stinks,
by the way. He's
so bad. The only thing that helps the sting of that contract, if you're a Nuggets fan, is the fact that now they've got some rings to go along with it. But you did what you needed to do to the 2 best players on that team in Game 5, and you just couldn't get it done because once again, the shots weren't falling. That was so frustrating. I feel like I would have been less depressed yesterday had the Heat lost, like how the Panthers lost last night.
Okay, all right.
The Panthers just get whooped by the Knights, and in some way, it's like, nah.
All right, so ZASLOW Show 2.0 poll today. Here's the poll question today, all right? You ready? And we've had this conversation, I think, many times when we were doing shows together. ZASLOW Show 2.0 poll question. Go to @ZASLOW Show and vote. Considering the last 2 nights, how would you rather your season end? And your answers are tight game, blowout. So which one? Considering what we experienced the last 2 nights, how would you rather your championship round series to end? Tight game or blowout?
I always said tight game because I'm here for the competition and I do love the exhilaration of it all. I always said tight game. But I did find myself more depressed yesterday than I would have been if the Nuggets had just whooped that ass in game 5. That's the reality, right? Because at some point with the Panthers, it was so out of control so early last night. I mean, it was out of control by the time I got off air last night.
The mid-second period.
I really had no hope.
In the middle of the second.
Right. I had very little hope. And that, in a way, you're like, okay, what could there's nothing for us to do. There's no second guessing. There's a lot of second guessing for me coming off of that Heat series. What if Jimmy was just that much healthier, right? Or what if Max could just have gotten that ball in the hoop, whatever. There's so much second guessing. And the second guessing will kill you. Like that's what will kill you.
It's funny that that's your attitude, because what's my answer always been?
Blowout.
I've changed my mind.
Really?
I've changed my mind.
So we flipped. We flipped in this one.
After experiencing the last 2 nights, I did not like what I was feeling last night.
With the Panthers?
I did not like that. And I've always been, I'll take the blowout because I don't want my heart ripped out. Now, granted, if you're going to add in blowout or lose at the buzzer, that might be a different story, okay? Because that's always been my attitude. I don't want the game to end, and I want to jump out a window. All right, so I'd rather the blowout.
Like that game against Boston,
right?
Like the way that ended with them being against the buzz. That's like that was one of the worst experiences of my life.
Right. That game ends, I want to put a gun in my mouth. Like it was the worst. It was so bad. But based on what we saw, like just in general, tight game or blowout, what we saw the last 2 nights, I did not enjoy what I was watching last night. In the third period, I was just sitting there watching, and like I was on the verge of tears in game. Like I was so sad. And at least with the Heat the night before, and part of it is that style of play, because I enjoyed that game. Like I loved
such a trash game. I loved boring.
That was a great
game. Everybody.
No, that was a great game.
The ratings were so far up, by the way, in these NBA finals, which is remarkable because everybody said that nobody was going to tune in.
The Heat are a very popular team. The Heat are a very popular team.
And credit to Denver as well. Like they're such a good team. I think Jokic is far more of a legitimate superstar than people give him credit for. Like I do think he rates better than people realize. And I think he'll rate better now also coming off of this championship because he was so hilarious, unintentionally hilarious after winning the title. So I think that's going to help the whole start. I mean, he hates it. He hates his job. It's hilarious and relatable for a lot of people. Not for me. I love my job, but hilarious. Nevertheless, for him to have that job and to hate it, it is so funny. So I do think his star power will rise even more after this. But all you heard was that the ratings were going to be down. The ratings were so far up. Everybody should have turned off their television for game 5. Like if that wasn't an elimination game,
game,
that thing was trash.
That was that game was exactly that game was my drugs. I love the anxiety throughout that type of game, So it's funny. You and I both turning where I prefer the tight game loss now, and you were leaning toward the blowout. So
no, I say that, but I do look back on that game with Boston, and it was such a terrible, terrible feeling after that game. But up until that moment, I do have awesome memory because I was in the Bahamas. I'm watching that series in the Bahamas in the sports book
that's swaying
with my big brother and his
Bahamas.
Friends.
That's swaying your opinion.
Well, because it was so fun. It was so fun being in the sports book in a foreign country. Everybody in the Bahamas was rooting for the Heat because obviously the proximity there, I would imagine, to Miami. It was just so fun. It was standing room only. Yes, he hits the free throws. The whole sports book's going insane. Like there were memories leading up to then the ultimate most terrible feeling in the entire world when that last second shot goes in. And we didn't even realize it went in at first because it felt like he didn't get it off in time. That ended up being terrible. The journey there was fabulous. So maybe I'm lying a little bit about the blowout, but man, I was depressed coming off of game 5.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit, because the way that I'm experiencing these last 2 nights and these 2 seasons ending, this all-time playoff run down here in South Florida, I wouldn't have felt this way when I was a kid, because, you get this far and you lose, or, however your season ends, like I'm a mess. But now that I've gotten older, I guess it's become more to me about getting the individual memories, being a part of the moments, you know?
It's about the
And
journey, not the
yes,
destination,
of course,
Zaslow. Look at you mature.
I've learned to appreciate the journey more, where
Yeah.
holy shit, like the last 2 months, the moments that the Heat gave us and the moments that the Panthers gave us. Yes, it did not end, with the ultimate goal, but man, like I'm hugging my kids after some of these games and some of these wins, especially the 7-0 in overtime. The Panthers, like overtime wins where it ends in sudden death. I'm hugging my kids, jumping around the room, So I found myself appreciating so much more just being in these moments, even though it didn't end the way we wanted to.
Yeah, it's more of a macro. Listen, as you get older, you have the more macro view on life than you did when you were younger. I think that is just part of being an adult rather than being a kid. You just realize there's also a lot more perspective there about how much it really matters in the grand scheme of things. And it's those moments, your team's giving you those moments, playing weeks or months longer than everybody else, so that you are provided those memories. Like that in and of itself is so damn cool. And it's why we're all here. It's why you and I have quite literally built our entire livelihood on it. We built our entire livelihood on the journey. We didn't build our livelihoods on the rings. Let's be honest. The rings come few and far between, even if you have a hell of a franchise like the Miami Heat. You're not competing for rings each and every year. It's not possible for anybody, but they give us a journey just about each and every year. And that to me is so much more important. It's unbelievable. This 4-year run for Jimmy, there's no rings. Maybe there will never be a ring for Jimmy Butler, but hell, if there aren't some memories. I mean, there are so many memories, and it has been so fun. And I am so grateful for him joining the Miami Heat and what Riley has once again built down here. Because even if there isn't quite enough to take on a juggernaut like Jokic and actually get the ring, there's certainly enough to compete for it. And that in and of itself is far more important. All of that being said, by the way, though, I don't want to hear that from my athletes in the moment. Like Giannis going full macro, there's more important things in life after he lost to the Heat. Miss me with that in the immediacy. Like nobody wants to hear it. We all have that perspective. It's a beautiful perspective. We all appreciate life. These are memories with our children, blah, blah, blah. No, I want you to pretend like that is the most important thing in the world to you in that moment that you lose it. If you win it like Jokic, though, it's hilarious if you pretend like it doesn't matter to you at all.
I have another poll question for you from yesterday's show. ZASLOW Show 2.0 poll. So this is coming right after Game 5's loss. Which moment from Game 5 will haunt you the most?
Yeah.
And we got 4 options, all right? Jimmy's late turnover, Strus's missed corner 3, Zeller's minute at the start of the 4th, or Bruce Brown's offensive rebound and putback.
The Zeller minutes. I would say actually that Jimmy late turnover, because that was the moment I was standing up, and that was the moment that I said, well, looks like we just lost the NBA championship. Like that was the moment that I gave up all hope and I sat back down because I was just done. The second Jimmy turns it up, he made so many down the stretch. And again, I don't want to pile on Jimmy, but he is the best player on the team. And the onus does end up falling on him down the stretch. He made multiple decisions that I just thought were awful decisions. And the way that he was deferring, the way he was kicking the ball out when he'd get under the basket, just so many times. But that turnover was just so ugly that was the moment that I knew that we were toast, that we lost it, that Denver won it. So that'll be the moment that I would vote for.
That was the winner. If 43% of the vote, that was the winner. For me, though, I would have voted Bruce Brown's offensive rebound and putback. Miami's defense was so good the last few minutes. That was the only basket they had. They then added on 4 free throws after that because we were intentionally fouling. We were getting stop after stop after stop, and we got to stop there, but we couldn't close out the possession. I think we win if Jimmy doesn't turn the ball over there, they don't necessarily score. We don't know that. But if the Heat got that rebound, I think we win the game. We were up by 1 still.
Didn't the 2-minute report say that we got away with 1 there too? There should have been a foul, and then it ended up being okay. Yeah, I think that 2-minute report said that we got away with one that should have been called right before that Bruce Brown rebound. I'm not positive, but if I remember off the top of my head. But yeah, that was frustrating. Listen, all of it was frustrating.
Yeah.
45 seconds of Cody Zeller was unbelievably frustrating. Like all of it, all those moments were awful. I don't want to reflect on any of them, but your best player, the face of your team, even if he doesn't have his legs, can't turn the ball over to lose the NBA Finals. Like that is not the way that you go out if you're supposed to be the best player in the league in the postseason, which at one point Jimmy Butler was.
I don't know if you heard this from last night. So the Panthers get their shit kicked in last night, and Matthew Tkachuk didn't play.
Right.
Didn't play the game
and by the way, the second that news came down, because that news broke right before the game. In fact, I was in the middle of we actually did a hockey segment on Joe and Amber last night. One and done, Panthers. But it was right when we were doing the hockey segment, the news comes down that he's out. I'm like, all right, the Panthers are screwed. All right. I mean, you can find offense anywhere anyways. And now you don't have him play. And then we find out today it was a broken sternum.
So
he's out there playing a game with a broken sternum.
Okay, so that's what I want to ask you. So that's
hockey players. Crazy.
Okay. How many years would an NBA player be out if he had a broken sternum?
Oh, he'd never play again. Never play again.
Never play again.
He'd retire.
So
these guys. You see how Jokic flies across the court when Kyle Lowry breathes on him?
So Paul Maurice, after you cracking yourself up. So Paul Maurice last night,
NBA players, man.
Panthers coach after the game. And this always happens after the Stanley Cup Finals. You find out what injuries guys have been playing through. All right. And he mentions there that Tkachuk not only had a broken sternum, and you knew if he wasn't playing that.
Oh, yeah, he's dead.
Like it has to be so serious.
So bad.
So serious, That's why, I got a tweet last night, before game. Kachuk's not playing. I mean, what a pussy. I'm like, can we use some common sense here? All right. These are the toughest guys. I was talking to Kenny Albert on my show yesterday, and we were talking about injuries that players played through during the Stanley Cup Final. And I forget which player it was, but he mentioned how, I think it was this season, maybe it was a couple of seasons ago, Buddy got hit in the face of the puck, 75 stitches inside and outside, returned in the game. Okay. So anyway, Paul Maurice discloses some of these injuries after the game. I played it earlier on my show here today. And Matthew Tkachuk not only has a broken sternum, but it happened in game 3. It happened in game 3, where he went on to score the game tying goal with 2 minutes left in the game. So helped the Panthers win that game, played through it in game 4, and then just couldn't do it.
People had to get him dressed in game 4. He couldn't dress himself.
Yep. And then just couldn't do it anymore for game 5. We also found out he disclosed Aaron Ekblad. Aaron Ekblad broke his foot in the first round against Boston, missed 0 games, also dislocated his shoulder twice in this postseason, missed 0 games. My question, though, is how do they get past the doctors?
But they don't. I mean, the doctors aren't the same doctors. Like it's laughable because I do hear NFL players talking about this, and it's true. Like we clutch our pearls and make this huge deal, and I'm not saying we shouldn't when it comes to head injuries.
Well, yeah, and by the
NFL or anything else.
Head injuries are different, but by the way,
I'm not saying we should.
By the way, I'm glad that they get through the doctors. I want them playing. Okay, go ahead.
But in the NHL. And listen, even when it comes to those head injuries, okay, it seems like, it's just treated very differently. And the narrative around it, and I'm not saying that the NHL is doing anything wrong, and I'm not saying the NFL is doing anything wrong. It's just also the coverage. Like, it's just so much more accepted for some reason in hockey. I tell you what, my kid is 4 years old, and the first sporting event he ever went to was hockey games for the Tampa Bay Lightning, now that we live over on this coast. And he loves hockey. And I thought, there ain't no way in hell you're playing hockey. He asks me about it sometimes. He wants to take hockey lessons. These guys are maniacs. Yeah. Maniacs. I don't want my baby dislocating his shoulder, breaking his foot, playing through it. People are having to get him dressed because he's got a broken sternum. I don't want this happening to my baby, even if it's not long-term danger. These guys are maniacs. I don't want him anywhere near that sport. It's crazy.
I didn't, for the first time in my life, The Stanley Cup's the greatest trophy. I love the presentation, the look on the guys' faces. They lift the cup. There's something about it. It's very, very special. For the first time ever, I did not watch a second of it last night. I couldn't do it. I shut it off.
Yeah, I shut off that game early too. I
watched the whole game.
You watched the whole game. I
waited until the handshakes. I wanted to see our guys shake hands. I waited until the handshakes, and then I shut it off.
I was done.
I couldn't do it.
I was done.
I couldn't watch them raise the cup. I
didn't actually. Did you watch the Nuggets? Because I didn't really. I mean, I watched it for a few minutes after. I watched Jokic, which is super class. Like Jokic go and shake everybody's hand before celebrating, which was really classy. And we were all giving him a ton of credit, as we should. But I think also we realized like he wasn't actually planning to ever celebrate. So does it count as much?
Because he doesn't like basketball.
He doesn't like basketball.
Did you see him when he was told that he has to stay until Thursday because the parade is not for a few more days?
He was so pissed.
He's so mad. Oh no, I have to go
home to his horses, man. He's been away from Serbia so much longer than he normally is.
I don't have this impression
weeks ago.
I don't know. Maybe I'm ugly American because I don't have this impression that Serbia is like this good place to live.
But here's the thing. Well, first of all, some of that is American ignorance because we think everywhere else is not a good place to live, which is not the reality. But then second of all, you're not Jonathan ZASLOW living in Serbia. You're Nikola Jokic living in Serbia, right? Like, I would imagine that is probably a pretty good life. Like, I would imagine he's a very big
I live like a king here in Cooper City. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Guessing Jokic in Serbia is a little bit of a next level than Jonathan ZASLOW, even in Cooper City.
Yeah. Oh, these last 2 days, awful. Talking to you makes me feel better. You have made me feel better today. I was so, oh my God.
Well, that's good. I'm glad we did not do this podcast yesterday because
you were not in as good a mood.
Yesterday I was like genuinely just sad. I was just depressed. And it wasn't the most disappointed I've ever been because we were an 8th seed and nobody expected us to be there, including me, frankly. Mm-hmm. I mean, no, how could you? We were about to get eliminated with 3 minutes left in the second elimination game, right? I mean, how could you believe in the Heat? And also having to watch them during the regular season was not the most fun experience. But I was still so sad because it had been just such a hell of a run. And then also so sad.
I also thought they were going to win. I thought they were going to win.
Well, and then so sad because, well, so did I. I mean, I took the Heat in 7, but also so sad because this is the time of year now that just sucks for me. Oh. It just does. And it's like the stark realization of like, all right, now basketball is over. Now hockey's over. And here we are in the dog days of summer.
Yeah, it's like now today, I'm like, all right, what time's the Marlins game tonight?
Right.
What time are they playing?
Which, listen, they're doing a lot better than they've been doing, but
well, the best thing is about going this deep into the playoffs is we're a week away from the NBA draft, and then we're only like 2 weeks after that away from all the free agency, where it feels like the Heat are going to be big time players. So we're not like I don't think Pat Riley is going to fall for the hey, let's run it back. Look how far we got. I think you look at this team and we can't go 2 straight years of doing nothing. They did nothing last summer.
Right, but you don't have a ton, right? I mean, you've got a center package around Tyler Hero. He's coming off the broken hand, though, so that's not
I think great. Duncan Robinson has absolutely worked his trade value back. Absolutely.
Yes, that's true. Although people still may be a little scared of that contract. But yes, you're right. He's worked his trade value back some, so you could throw him in.
And you have 3 first-round picks that you can the Heat can absolutely do things.
Well, you have the 18th pick in this draft in 23. Mm-hmm. You have a first rounder in 27.
You could trade 27 and 29 and 29.
Oh, 29. Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously you have second rounders you can include.
You could actually unlock another pick if you negotiate a deal with Oklahoma City because they have that contingent 25 pick.
Well, and they have every pick ever. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, I get there's things that you can do. I just don't know if the package for a Damian Lillard or the package for a Bradley Beal is going to be as competitive.
I wouldn't trade for Beal.
Well, I'm just throwing names out there that have been tossed around as ideal. The helpful thing about I guess what you would hope if you go after Lillard, that Lillard wants to be in Miami. And so maybe there's some of that going on where, yes, maybe somebody else could come in with a better package and he's refusing to go.
That shit never happens. Like, he literally went in front of a camera and said Miami.
Well, he did that. And also he, as the player who has never once ever, hardly ever, until this offseason, he said one thing that made you think maybe he'd leave the Blazers one day, but hardly ever has he ever said anything against his franchise. I mean, he has been nothing but loyal. And so for that particular player to come out and say the thing that even most of those guys who will be more publicly disgruntled won't say, that was really shocking.
Amber, tell everyone again how they can hear my favorite show on ESPN Radio. Go ahead.
Joe and Amber, 7 to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday. You can find us also on the ESPN app. You can find us on Sirius XM channel 80.
Excellent job, Amber. Thank you.
You're welcome.